Hi, this is Tracy Swedlow, and this is Televisionation. I am very happy to welcome Curtis Barone to the show. Welcome, Curtis. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Tracy. Thank you for having me today.
So much is going on, and I know we're going to talk about things behind your head here, all those beer cans. But one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to you is because we wanted to see how you are. I know that you actually did contract COVID-19 and been through a lot, and we wanted to find out how you're doing and see how you've adapted to that situation and what's happening with you in the industry.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Yes, I was fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your perspective, to be the first person in Oklahoma to have tested positive for COVID-19.
But how do you think you got it, by the way? How do you think you picked that up?
We're not sure, but my youngest son was studying abroad in Rome this semester. And my middle son and I went over to visit him. So we started off in London, actually stayed with my wife's brother and his family, watched a Premier League soccer game, went to Rome for a few days, came back to London, brought my youngest son, watched another Premier League soccer game, and then came back. And this was all between February 15th through the 23rd. And then by Sunday, March 1st, I started showing symptoms. But when I was in Rome at the time, there were no cases in Rome. When I was neither of my sons exhibited symptoms or were diagnosed with it. My wife's brother and his family, who we stayed with for 5 days, didn't catch it either. So I was in Rome, I was in London, it was going through Europe, but I could have easily gotten it, in O'Hare on my way back when I was traveling through the airport. We're just not really sure where I contracted it.
So what were the symptoms?
So I experienced one of the 5 that they talked about. I had fever for about 48 hours, but I didn't have shortness of breath. I didn't have coughing. I didn't lose my sense of taste or smell. And think of the symptoms you have with like the flu, but only make them, 5 times more acute or strong, if you will. And that's what I had for about 48 hours before I started showing improvement. So fever around 102 during that time, chills, night sweats, extreme fatigue, exhaustion. I had a sore throat as well. I ended up being diagnosed with strep throat as well at the same time. But I was fortunate in one respect because at the time Oklahoma didn't have testing capabilities when I went to the minor emergency facility. So they took my samples, a detailed process, and then sent the samples to the CDC in Atlanta to be tested. So that was.
Did you even suspect? I'm sorry,
No,
that was on Sunday?
No, my wife and I thought, I had the flu, and I was actually supposed to travel that day for a business trip. And so I was like, well, if we get in before I travel, maybe I get some medication, I may be able to travel or maybe delay my travel a day because I'll take a medication and start feeling better. But we didn't think COVID-19 never really came into the equation. But by Tuesday night, I was showing, some improvement. By Friday, March 6th, I was actually symptom free, but I got a call at noon that day from the Tulsa Health Department that said, hey, by the way, you've tested positive for COVID. Don't tell anybody because we're working on a press conference with the governor. So
Wow.
because they had tested a few people, but everybody tested negative. So I was the first positive test in Oklahoma at the time. While I was sick, I feel like it was a blessing that Oklahoma didn't have testing and they developed it. They announced the capability that Thursday or Friday. But because we didn't have the capability, I didn't have the emotional stress of, wow, I've got COVID-19 during this process. I just felt like it was the flu and just kind of battled it, if you will, as you would the flu or any other type of illness like that.
And it was before all of the the reported deaths or any of the examples of the types of people who are naturally prone to getting this and or even dying, right? So you didn't have that kind of fear that I think a lot of people have when they hear, that it's out there or that might have it. So
It was the early days, to your point. So we knew that older white males were more susceptible at the time, but we didn't have the level of understanding that we have today in terms of, and we knew it was respiratory, but we didn't have the details of like, younger people, overweight people, people with diabetes, etc. African Americans, that those data
Latino.
points weren't fully clear. Latinos as well. It's been in the last 30 days, I think, if I remember correctly, that those types of data points have come forward as well.
And so what happened to your family members? Did you have to
So
quarantine from them, or what happened?
I was quarantined to the master bedroom, which has a bathroom. So I lived in a 12 by 12 space for about 12 days. Once
Wow.
I was symptom free that Friday, I had to wait till the following Monday to be retested again. And at the time, you were deemed recovered if you had 2 negative tests in a row. So they swabbed me again on Monday, I think March 9th. Results came back Tuesday and I was negative. Then they swabbed me again and results came back on Thursday and I was negative. So,
and did they come to your house?
Yes, they used
dressed in hazmat suits. I
mean, dressed in PPE. Yes, I wouldn't go as far as hazmats because they didn't have the helmets and like the airtight, but they had the vest, the mask, the gloves, and everything. So my son arrived from Rome back on March 5th, so the Thursday before. He was tested and deemed tested negative, but he had to quarantine for 14 days. So when I was deemed recovered on the 12th, I moved out. My wife then had to begin her own recovery, her own quarantine of 14 days at that time. So I ended up with the shortest quarantine. My son was the second. My wife was quarantined for about 30 days as my caregiver.
And when you say quarantine, so your wife was in the master bedroom for 14 days too?
No, she was in the rest of the house. When my son came home, he was quarantined to his room. So I was in the master bedroom, my son was in his room, and then my wife was kind of living in the rest of the house. So
and you're in the rest of the house too, right? At that time?
No, I was literally in my master bedroom. I didn't venture outside of it. And she ventured all over the house, and then would come in, with appropriate caution to take my temperature or do something like that, so to speak. Bring food.
And she had to bring food to both of you?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of that's marriage. The things that married people do for each other. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it was actually funny because it wasn't funny, but what was funny is right about the time you started this, I believe one of your first episodes was with Chris Pizzura. And I remember watching it, and that episode started with him talking about how he and his wife had contracted it as well, and they were both doing better and had recovered. So I was like, oh, I know Chris pretty well. And I'm like, oh, a brother, we have it. We've had it together. Something else we can share.
So have you tested for antibodies now, or?
I have actually, I have done multiple tests. I've actually donated in the story went from, being the first and the ramifications of the reactions to the community and so forth, both good and bad, to about 30 days later, I donated my plasma through the American Red Cross for a trial that's underway in Tulsa, one of 2 that's underway. And that was on a Thursday. And they gave it to a patient Saturday night, a female with diabetes, overweight, late 30s, who'd been on a ventilator in a hospital for a week. And by Monday morning, she had recovered to the point they were going to take her off the ventilator, and they were hopeful she would be out of the hospital by the end of the week. And then I just donated plasma again, a second time, last week. So about a week ago. So
Wow.
I've
What
done some
happened?
of, go ahead, sorry.
What happened to the woman? Do you know? Did she
I
survive?
do not know beyond that. So I haven't heard. And then, but I've done some prick tests and they showed negative, which is interesting because, that's one of the key questions with some of the tests that were coming onto the market is the reliability of them, so to speak. At this point, I'm just, I've been asked twice to donate plasma, and I'll probably donate again in another 3+ weeks whenever I'm eligible, but I'm having to wait 28 days between plasma donations.
And when you say plasma, you mean blood, right? Or is there something else
No,
to it?
it's more, I'm actually, they're actually taking my blood and spinning it, removing plasma and platelets, and then using the platelets for cancer patients, and then pumping the blood back in. So they're actually just taking two components, if you will, of the blood.
Oh, I didn't know how that worked. Interesting.
Yeah.
And how did your neighbors respond to the fact that you had it? Because that guy in New Rochelle, right, who got it in New York,
Uh-huh.
the neighbors, it was a difficult experience, right, for a while.
Right.
So how did your neighbors respond?
So from our neighbors, we kind of kept it quiet. And when they did the press release, they didn't specify me by name, but it was a much more difficult situation with the broader community at large. Being the first in Oklahoma, I guess, but the first in general. You assume that the state and the medical facilities and other types of facilities had plans or were developing plans to deal with COVID. And so my case actually just kind of brought it to the forefront. And I think in some ways that was a positive because it allowed Oklahoma to start, knowing it was out there, it's here. Now let's start making sure we've got plans in place, procedures in place, et cetera. But the broader community, it's like anything, any type of situation like this, you're going to have people that react in a very negative manner and people that react in a very positive manner. In some of the negative reactions, I think there were people, rightfully so, they have respiratory conditions or autoimmune diseases that, they need to be concerned about their health and safety and what's going on. And then there's other people that I think they were just reacting out of fear and didn't fully understand what was going on, the nature of the illness, how it moves from people to people, or person to person.
When you say negative responses, like what happened? Did people come to your door? Did they camp
Nope.
outside? Did they send you nasty emails? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, more along the lines of nasty texts and emails, none to me, but to my wife's family in the area. My daughter was out of the house for the whole time I was quarantined. My son was quarantined and my wife was quarantined. She was actually out of the house for about 5+ weeks. So
wow. Where did she stay, with relatives?
She stayed with family and friends, moving a couple times because the community was reacting the way they were. Her family was getting text messages from people because within, a couple hours of the press conference, people started speculating who it was at her school. And then, within 24 hours, they were actually, stating it was her father. So she took some grief as well.
Wow.
But in the end, the negative was turned into a positive with the donation. And, hopefully we'll get to a point as a society that we can develop the vaccines, be confident in the procedures, how we need to handle ourselves in public so that we can get on top of this and start, returning the economy back to what it was prior to COVID-19.
Were there any positive things that happened that surprised you when people found out it was you?
I think the biggest positive was, I think people kind of were giving me, people were calling me a hero for like donating plasma. And I feel like, well, I'm not really a hero. I'm just doing what I feel like most people would do if they were exposed and had the disease and recovered, and you had the opportunity to help somebody else out by donating, your plasma through the convalescent therapy. I feel like most people would.
You
So
know,
I went,
Tom Hanks's people put out a press release to let everybody know that he had donated plasma. And I'm
yes,
like, I think it's a great thing that you did donate plasma, but I think absolutely people should do that,
right,
and it is a good thing. But putting out a press release, that's some serious,
right, right. I remember James Dolan, owner of the Knicks and Madison Square Garden, and Cablevision, if he still owns it, and everything, multiple properties. He had it recovered, and I don't know that he put a press release, but he was mentioned in a story that I read at one point that he had donated plasma. So it's again, I think, like you said, I'm with you. I think most people would donate given the opportunity if they're in similar circumstances. So I don't see myself as a hero. I see all the first responders. I see the people that trying to figure out how they could help and on their own. Like my wife found a local lady that makes masks, and so we bought masks for ourselves, my family, all our kids, a couple of the girlfriends of the kids. My wife had a friend in North Carolina that she's been talking to. We bought masks for them. So it's just like the everyday people that are finding ways to do their part to help out with this pandemic.
And were you certified to be able to go out? I mean, have you left your house since? I mean, I haven't. We haven't gone out beyond our house here in our backyard since early March.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, I was going to say, so Oklahoma went into phase one of reopening, if you will, May 1st. Some of the outlying suburbs started opening up the Friday before. May 1st, I believe, was a Monday. So we've been opened up for about almost 2 weeks, which is, restaurants. Some restaurants are allowing dine-in. A lot of them are
really?
still doing takeout or pickup or takeout or delivery. I'm not really ready to go eat in a restaurant, but there are restaurants that are serving people inside. The fitness center we belong to is opened up. So some of those types of
Really?
businesses, yes, salons and spas, I believe, have opened up as well. So it's a gradual process. And so I've been out a few times. I was also, once I was deemed cleared, I've gone to the grocery store a couple of times, but obviously wearing masks and practicing social distancing and so forth. So, but it's interesting to see how different how how different people react. And as you can imagine, you've just got two camps: either those people that are going to practice social distancing um, and all the aspects of that, versus those that don't wear masks, don't practice social distancing. They have no problem standing 1 foot behind you in the line when they've got at the grocery store or a Sam's where they've got X's marked off or boxes set up where you move from one box to the other. So I think a lot can be said about it'd make for a great sociology experiment, I think.
I think you're right. I think I'm sure the researchers are out there somewhere observing all of
Yeah,
these things, taking photos.
yeah,
I'm kind of sad that we are completely isolating ourselves because I'm not really getting to see what's happening outside. I mean, all the businesses are closed and boarded up, and
right.
and we order all our food in. But anyway, so how is your family doing? I'm assuming they're still fine. They haven't caught it. They haven't contracted
Yes.
it, and
Family's fine. Nobody's contracted it. I was told by the Tulsa Health Department that I was a model active patient because I work from home as a part of my job. I'm currently working with Movio as a vice president of advanced TV, but I've been in this kind of advanced television advertising space for, probably 20 plus years, with about the last maybe 17 on the data side of things,
And
working
you're a
with
good
different data
TVOT
partners.
attendee. You're a good
Yes.
TVOT attendee, so we appreciate that. I
Oh.
interrupted you. Can you give us an insight about what you do at Movio a little bit?
So I am, as a vice president of advanced TV, I'm focused on building out our partnerships in the television space. So I spent about the last 15 years focused on the TV side of things. So focused on, MVPDs and programmers and the OTT or CTV providers. How can we set up partnerships with them so that we support theatrical movie marketing, which obviously isn't happening right now. But we want to enable the studios and agencies that we support for theatrical movie marketing. We want to enable them to use our services across TV, as today they can use them for social, digital, and email marketing campaigns.
I mean, couldn't you just translate that? I mean, you'd have to pivot a lot, right?
Right. So we could. I think, what you're starting to see now is exhibitors are starting to open up. Oklahoma has, or at least Tulsa has, a couple theaters that are opening up next week. As you can imagine, they're smaller independents where it's easier for them to kind of prepare and get ready for opening back up. But the question is going to be, at what point is the industry ready, both in terms of the scale, in terms of the number of theaters that are open, and the studios in terms of there's enough scale there for them to start releasing their, new titles, so to speak.
And Disney launched Trolls 2. That's these companies are starting to release them directly to the consumer, the viewer. So that might change the whole industry altogether, right? And we might have to. Yeah. That whole thing will be switching on a dime. But I know we don't really want to go into depth right now about the movie marketing business. Mel's Drive-In here, that's the name of it, which is the restaurant that was used to shoot, Francis Coppola's movie with Harrison Ford. What was that called? That early black and white film he made about the 1950s. But it was about, car culture in the 50s and teenagers and things like that. But of course, they've gone back to delivering your food to your car, like the old drive-in, like the old days in the 50s. So that's kind of exciting. And of course, drive-in theaters are experiencing a little strange resurgence too. That's been kind of interesting concept as concert venues as well. But anyway, let's talk about your theater, your office. Look what's behind you.
Oh, yes. So
what is all that?
So growing up, there's two things here. Growing up in the mid 70s, if you will, my brother and I collected beer cans. So what you have here is about 200 beer cans from our collection, from that collection. So these are some of the more decorative or more interesting types of cans. So you see, I've got the Schmitz from Philadelphia with different wildlife scenes from the 70s. Iron City was a Pittsburgh brewing company. Here's a bicentennial collection. And then over here you have celebrating the different professional sports teams in Pittsburgh. So like the Steelers for their championships, the Pirates, the Penguins, etc. So this is just kind of the remnants of what we have left. Is this a collectible collection? I mean, would this be of value to somebody out there if you were to sell it? Not that you would, but I'm sure it would be. So there are, at the time, there was a lot of beer can collectors. They had clubs. They had collectible books that helped you with valuation of cans and stuff like that. So I assume that that's still going on, but since I'm not an avid collector, if you will, and haven't thought about selling, I'm not sure where that stands.
Which is your favorite? Which is your favorite can?
Probably the Schmitz cans because of the different wildlife scenes. So
what's the oldest can?
The oldest can is actually at the top, second row. You see a gold Budweiser can, that Acme can that's 3 to what would be your left, the black can. And then I don't know if you can see it really well, but there's a cone top right there called True Blue, and that was one of the first beer cans, if not the first beer can ever produced right here. So cone top because it had a raised top, and then it's still got the cap on it. It's just in bad shape because we found it in that condition, so to speak. And of course, that sits next to the geek side of me, all of my Lord of the Rings pewter collectibles.
I hear you on that. We all have our weird science fiction collection somewhere, right? A lot of us. I have mine. You have yours.
Exactly. So.
Sounds good. And like I said earlier, I see Opus up there.
Oh, yes, and Opus.
Burke Breeds.
Yes, big Opus fan. Dilbert as well.
And you know, this is only American cans, not like Japanese beer and things like that, right?
No, there are some international beer cans in there. There's a Tooheys and Foster's from Australia. There's a Guinness cans from Ireland. There's there's some Austrian beer up there. There's a Carlsberg. So there's a few kind of sporadic cans. And then, let's see, I've got some German from look down there at the bottom, the gallon beers. They used to make gallon beer cans. So I don't know if they still make those or not. But so got a few.
Well, that's an amazing insight into your world. Is there anything coming up in your life or at work that you want to let everybody know about?
Nothing at this point in time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story. And, I would encourage if anybody, for those out there that have tested positive and recovered from COVID, if they haven't donated, please do so, because it'll, you not only have the opportunity to help somebody else in terms of the convalescent therapy, but also that helps us get that much further along in these trials to truly validate the effectiveness of the convalescent therapy and potentially help us on the research side as well.
Well, that's fantastic advice. Thank you so much for being a good citizen, a good human being. This is your press release we're putting out for you anyway. But you're a great member of our community, and I'm so happy to call you friend and a colleague. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. And likewise. And I will be looking forward to TVOT San Francisco. Is it about 5 or 6 weeks? The virtual edition?
Well, that's right? The virtual. It's going to be online, so stay tuned.
Right.
We'll have lots of information here.
Right.
We're going to have all kinds of fun things, so stay tuned.
Looking forward to that. So you've done a great job, remarkable job with the show. And yes, I've enjoyed going to your show many times since its inception. A great place for content, new ideas, new thoughts, as well as networking and meeting new people. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Stay in touch with me about what's going on with Movio as well. We welcome them to come online with your CEO if he ever wants to. Let us know what's going on. Thank you so much, Curtis.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tracy.
I hope you're immunized forever. So we'll see. We don't know yet, right?
We don't know yet. We'll find out. But I hope I am immune for a very long time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Curtis Barone, and he is a member of our community and from Movio. I'm Tracy Swedlow. This is Televisionation. Please contact me if you would like to tell your story of what's happening in your life and in your work. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.